Welcome to the Church Security Answer Man. Today we're talking about the use of force in church security and your responsibility. Hello, I'm Joe Puckett. Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Church Security Answer Man. I'm so glad you're here with us. Today we're talking about a very important topic, and that's very relative to your liability, the church's liability, your responsibilities when it comes to use of force as a member of the church security team. Now, I am just giving you my opinions today as a former law enforcement member, church security member, all of those kind of things. I just want to influence your thoughts today and have some frank discussions with you about this very important topic. But I'm not here to give you legal advice. You should be consulting your church's attorney, your insurance company, anyone along those lines. But I want to give you some opinions because in this area, there's not a lot of opinions out there that are spread around it. I just want to give you some solid opinions about what I think's going on in this area and some things for you to think about. So let's jump right in and get started. So when you talk about use of force, you know, there's my concern for you is this is the area where we can limit our liabilities. And I think as well as the church's liabilities, as I mentioned, and I think too often what we get is this idea of like, when can we use force? When can I use some kind of force? You know, when can I strike someone? We're always looking for those, and especially some of our newer members to our team, or maybe some of the newer members to our church, as well. And so, there's questions like, when can I use deadly physical force? I'm concerned about these kind of things when I give you my opinion. So, and I think we should really look at how serious that is. When we do something like this, this is a life-changing event for you, much less other people. Just the person involved, the subject or suspect, if you strike somebody with your hand or with something else, it can be life-changing for them, much less if you use deadly force. But also think about it can be the same thing for your church members. Those people in attendance that day, that they see you take some sort of action. Don't forget that as well. It can be life-changing for them and our families. And it can also be life-changing for you. When we get into this kind of a situation, it can be serious. There can be lawsuits involved, all kinds of liability issues. So I want to talk about, in these areas, talking about how can we avoid some of this stuff instead of what I hear all too often. I get those emails from people way too often that say, hey, when do you think I can use force at this level? Or when you got this? And hey, what about handcuffing people? Can we get some handcuffs and handcuff people? And, and the list goes on of those questions that I get. And so that's why I want to say today, I want to talk about in use of force, that I want to be more asking questions like, when do I have to use force? When am I forced to do this kind of thing? And I want to encourage you to develop that attitude because of these life-changing incidents for all of us involved, not to mention the liabilities, getting sued. There could be all kinds of things, a drawn out police investigation, all kinds of things involved in this situation. So I want to get us more in the cautious mode. I want you prepared, and I'm all about taking action, but I want you to be prepared for that action. And maybe we get to where we're really on that line to where we know we don't want to do it too soon, but what are our other options, that kind of thing. When do I have to strike someone? Instead of when can I strike someone, we're talking about when do I have to strike someone? Or when do I have to use deadly force or deadly strikes to someone? And so, and this is for armed, unarmed church security. Whatever you do at your church, I want to support you. And hopefully by now from watching my stuff, I'm all about giving you great content, great information here to help you. There's not really fluff. It's really, I want to be direct and give you good information that helps you. So the mindset really is important. What options do you have at various levels? That's what I want to begin to talk about here. And what options do you have given the variables with different scenarios, different situations that might happen. What are all your options? And we want to be thinking about that. I don't want us to just be focused on you're needing to use force or you're wanting to use force. And maybe it's somebody on your team that's newer to the team that concerns you a little bit. So we want to have this discussion, and I hope really you'll share this stuff with them. So, as we talk about use of force and your responsibilities, we talk about preparing for this stuff, preparation. And I want to encourage you to always be learning. Whatever you can find on the internet for training for you, for your team, whatever that looks like. I suspect most of you don't have a huge team, but whatever that looks like. Getting prepared, learning new stuff, communication is always a great tool for us to be looking at and be trying to learn. How can I say stuff to people? How can I get better prepared for dealing with those that are having mental health issues or somebody that's angry or somebody that's difficult? Always thinking of those kind of things. And then, of course, your defensive tactics as well. Getting prepared for that kind of stuff. Wherever you can learn that. Lots of things on the internet. Make sure you're looking for trustworthy stuff, but and evaluating that heavily, especially before we look at it as a team and prepare our policies or our actions based on that. We want to be careful about that. And whatever current skills you have, we want to be practicing those. I mean, if you're carrying a firearm, you want to be practicing with that, as we talk about in other blogs or vlogs and podcasts. We're talking about that stuff all the time. Practice what skills you already have. Practice with whatever tools that you already have. And I also suggest that you study what other communities are doing. What are other churches doing, or what are other volunteer groups doing to protect their groups? So, and certainly I would focus on churches wherever you can. Very important. And pay attention to security or crime issues or trends. What do you see going on in your region? But for church security, we might also look nationally. We might look at the big picture of what's going on. What do we see happening in other churches? But you want to also kind of be aware of what's going on in your state. And that's some of the things I don't get into because I don't know each of the individual states or regions of what some of the things are that are developing there, what all the rules are. So you want to be paying attention to that. What other incidents are going on? And that can be, looking at citizens using force against other citizens to defend people. Look at some of those trends that are going on and see what's happening and look at them down the road. Don't just look at the day of a story that you read about. Dig into it a little bit further down. What's happening to that incident, to that person a few months down the road or a year down the road, looking back, what happened to that person after they used force or they put a focused strike on somebody to get control of them, those kind of things. Pay attention to that stuff when it comes up in your community or your states. And look for leaders. I certainly want to be here for you to give you these blogs and other information. And we certainly have training. You can find out about that stuff in the comments, or go look at churchsecurityanswerman.com. We try to help you with free stuff, other training, but not just us. It's not just all about us. It's about what are the resources that you can find as well in your community. Seek out people that know this stuff, and that can give you some direction. And also your leaders within your church are important. What do they want? What do they want you to do? And so getting those answers from those leaders, your leaders, as well as community leaders, what do they recommend, is always great information for you. So, and helping you get prepared and your team to get prepared. So we look at use of force and what we might call a continuum or a diagram that we see here, kind of a guideline. So there's all kinds of names for it. There's trends of what's a cool name currently or what's the previous name, but typically we've called this like a use of force continuum. It gets bigger and bigger, and this is not the technical continuums, but this is just for us for a discussion here as I see it. I'm giving you my opinions from my experience, those kind of things. So I want to put this in a form that kind of fits with what We're talking about what we're doing, what our professional level is and our experience, that kind of thing. So we're basically keeping it simple. So you talk about your church security member, your member, or you're basically a civilian, we're at that level. So what can we do as far as, and what should we be looking at? That's what I want to talk to you about in this session. So as we look at, each level, avoidance, awareness, the threat, and it goes on up to what kind of action are you going to take? What kind of action should you take? Those kind of things. So, and we get ourselves up to deadly force, which doesn't have to just be with a gun. So those of you that are unarmed, I want you thinking about this as well. So what you can take action that is deadly force and it not be a firearm. It can be with an instrument that you pick up and strike someone with. So we want to be talking about those things for all of us in this process. So let's start with avoidance as we look at this gradual using more and more force or more effort to stop someone or to control someone, those kind of things. And remember, this is about your responsibilities as a church security team member or a usher who's acting as a security team member. And it's also about liability. You cannot forget about the liability concept. Protecting the church's liability is one of our big focuses. So, and should be one of our concerns is minimizing the liability of the church, your church leaders, as you conduct your work as a church security member. So one of those areas to help minimize your liability, the church's liability, keep you safe, keep the church safe, we look at these kind of things. Avoidance. Let's try to avoid the issue. How do we do that? We avoid acting alone where possible. That's a big deal because acting alone can give someone an opportunity to try to take advantage of us or to escalate their interaction with us because we're by ourselves. We start getting two people involved. That means there's two minds, two sets of eyes, two people to communicate, all of those kind of things. So, acting alone, get somebody else wherever you can. When you see a suspicious male out in the parking lot, can we get somebody else to go with us? And, maybe you're a single person security team member. And I get emails from both males and females that are acting alone as the security person for their church. So maybe you don't have another security team member. And I understand that. It's tough to get people to cover every part of the church and the issues that we need, much less security. It tends to be a newer thing that we're looking at. So, when you see a suspicious male, maybe you don't have another security team member, but do you have another church leader that you can find or somebody else that you can motion to? Arrange that stuff ahead of time. If I have an issue, can I call upon you? Will you go with me? Whether that's a second set of eyes, just to watch you from the corner as you talk to this person so they could call the police real quick if needed, or if somebody that's actually going to go with you. And I'd like to see you find somebody that's just going to go right with you and be there with you when you're making your contact with people or dealing with things. Dark parking lot patrols, if you're going out in the evening to make sure nobody's breaking into cars or nobody's out in the parking lot to attack people as they're leaving or showing up to a evening or nighttime service, get somebody else to go with you. Be walking around out there and have a flashlight. Both of you have a flashlight, waving those flashlights around, looking at things so that people are aware that you're out there and that there's two of you out there. We don't want to hide the fact that there's two of us out there. We want people to see that we're patrolling. We want those flashlights being seen and people to be aware that there's at least a couple of us out there walking around, and probably for liability purposes and to be seen, we should probably be wearing a vest, one of those traffic safety vests or something like that to where we don't get run over, but also people can see us. Be bold about this kind of situation when you're doing patrols. Now, there's other scenarios that we'll certainly talk about at times where you don't want to be extremely bold about it. But when we're on a patrol around the parking lot, grab a second person, whoever that is, walk around, wear a vest, hold a flashlight, shine that light around as you're looking around. Approaching someone who appears mentally ill, we want to have a second person with us or a second set of eyes that's watching you so that they can call somebody real quickly or run in and get somebody else to help you if necessary. So we want to be wise about this. Limit the chances of you getting hurt, limit the liabilities of the church. You want a witness around if you have to take some sort of action. There's all kinds of things here that we want to avoid acting alone if we can. And again, if you're one person security team, male, female, I don't care which one, but you're a one person security team, at least have somebody that you can motion to or you range ahead of time. They don't want to be on the security team, but there'll be a second set of eyes for you that they'll go out with you or be a second person for you. You know, if you're contacting people that appear angry, mental health issues, just out of the norm, you really want to have a second person with you. Very important for us to do that. And, you know, and I want to say, as our slide says here, you know, when can I call the police? You know, call the police to contact suspicious people, mentally ill people, or angry people when possible. Do you need to go right out there? That's a big question I want to ask you. Do you need to run right out there and contact that person? Or somebody comes to you and says, hey, there's a guy out in the parking lot that's walking around talking to somebody that's not there. And they're yelling at this person that we don't see. There's nobody there. So maybe a mental health issue. And so, you know, do you have to go right out and talk to them, or can you call the police and have them come and talk to them? So think of those kind of things. We want to minimize our liability exposure where we can. We want to maximize our safety. And so, you know, can we stand and watch them? Maybe our services, or maybe we're right in the middle of services, so it's not likely that people are going to be coming into church because we've been running for 30 minutes and we're not ready to dismiss. So is it possible that we can just watch this person from a window, from a door, and call the police and get them to come and talk to them, since we're in no hurry, nobody's in danger at the moment of having to walk into the parking lot around this person or that kind of thing? And so what can we do to minimize those issues? We can call the police. Let them take care of that situation. Next, we look at awareness as we go up through this use of force continuum, escalation, we might call it, or analysis, however you want to look at it. The next biggest thing, next issue that you want to pay attention to is be aware of what the situation is. How bad is it? How light is it? You know, what are your circumstances? Do you have help? All of those kind of things can be important in this process. Being aware of the situation. What's out of place? What doesn't seem right here? We're paying attention to that. A person acting weird, or you see something in the parking lot that doesn't look right. Glass on the ground near a vehicle. You know, something that's just out of place. And really, what's not right about it? And what's the possibilities because of what you see? You know, and what goes along with that is this potentially dangerous? Is this a potentially dangerous situation? And when you start getting into some of these things that we can observe, you know, it's out of the ordinary. Something doesn't seem right. Is it dangerous? Maybe it's dangerous for one person to go look into the situation. So we go back to take a couple people out. Or again, do you have to run out? You know, do you have to run out there, or can you let the police, can you call them and ask them to come and check for this suspicious situation? Have them check on it. You know, use your intuition. Your gut feelings are also part of that. Being aware of the possibilities, analyzing it. Use your gut, and what does your gut tell you? And balance that with, do I really have to do something about this right now? Or can I call the police and wait a few minutes and see if they show up and talk to this person? Some of you are in small communities with police officers that are on duty that are not busy. But maybe it's a Friday night and it's really busy, and you're in a bigger town and there's lots of stuff going on. There's chaos or whatever downtown. So they're not going to get there for a while. So, you know, you kind of have to weigh those situations and be aware of that. Study what's going on in your community. We know what. Maybe ask, if you know a police officer, ask them about those kind of things. How busy are they on a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning, whenever you meet, or a Wednesday evening, whenever that is? Talk to them a little bit and say, how busy are they typically on those days, to where if you called in on some suspicious person, you know, would that typically be something that gets a quick response? And most of them are going to give you some sort of answer if you explain to them your interest in that. So, you know, think ahead of time, different scenarios. That's why you'll always hear me, especially if you take any of our training online, or in our other vlogs and those kind of discussions or podcasts, you'll hear us talk about scenarios. And I want to encourage you to think about what are the possible scenarios at your church, at your ministry, and how would you handle those different scenarios? What are the likely scenarios? What are the not so likely scenarios? But how would you handle those different scenarios, and practice. Give your brain some practice and give your brain some opportunities to make decisions to practice that process. And, you want to gather things. Times when I'm working on our security closet, we revamped that here a while back. I started looking at what do we need? We need some safety vests, we need some flashlights, other things for these different scenarios. And so we gather those supplies as budget allows or money allows, but we're also training our brain to think about what would I do in those different situations. So just to get better prepared and get your mind making decisions, and also to see if you need some sort of equipment for those types of situations. And then we look at the threat. We go to the next level and the threat. And based on your assessment, what do you see? What's your gut feeling? What's your analysis tell you? What have other people said? Maybe somebody came in, told you about a situation out in the parking lot and said, this person was talking to themselves and they were swinging a big stick, or kung fu fighting in the air, and they didn't see anybody that they were fighting. So you begin to develop an assessment of what's going on and what the situation is. Through awareness, you identify something abnormal, what you're hearing, somebody's telling you they saw, or what you actually see. Now you've got to assess that. What are you going to do? That's a threat assessment. What are you going to do? And we've kind of been talking about that, based on what are you hearing, what are you seeing? Is it a threat to anybody right now? Or we're all inside. I could lock the door from the outside so nobody else can get in. I can watch to make sure none of our folks are in the parking lot. But it's in the middle of service, so everybody's pretty much here that's going to show up. Everybody's inside that's safe. And then I've got this person out in the parking lot or out back or down on the edge of the sidewalk on the edge of our parking lot. In your assessment of the threat, is there really a threat right now? That's the kind of stuff we want to look at. We don't need to run out there if there's no threat. Now, it begins to change if the person's being aggressive in some manner and it's time for our people to be let out of church or out of our ministry service, whatever that looks like, or people are going to start showing up in a few minutes. Then that kind of begins to change it. But again, can we call the police and let them come and handle it? So, is it a legitimate threat? Do you look at it and see, you begin to evaluate, does it look like this guy's having mental health issues? Or is it maybe he's just different than the other people that are around, and maybe somebody kind of jumped to conclusions based on the fact that he's dressed differently or sitting a little bit differently than other people, those kind of things. So you evaluate it. You make a threat assessment and decide, is there really a legitimate threat here? And, and there's always important questions to ask. Is this a threat to you? Or is this a threat to other people? And we want to try to minimize that. So we get other people to go with us if it's a threat to you, or we call the police, we wait, what are our other options? If you feel like it's a threat and maybe the person's size or their behavior, maybe 2 people's not enough. Maybe you should take 3 people with you. All of those kind of things. You make the assessment and you evaluate, because we want to win the situation. We want to be safe. So we want to do what we have to do, what we need to do. If we need extra people, we want to get those people gathered, if at all possible. And if we can let the police handle it, call them and stand by and let them come and handle the situation. So, use again your intuition, your gut, and hopefully you're training and listening to different podcasts. There's other people out there that are putting out material as well. And listen to these things and get your mind exercised in what are threats, what are you going to do about those threats. And then don't forget, it's important to get direction from our leaders. Leaders in the community, law enforcement leaders, fire leaders, EMS leaders in your different scenarios. And then, of course, your ministry leaders, your church leaders. Get their opinion. What do they want you to do in these different circumstances? And you don't want to be uncertain. You don't want to have an uncertain situation an ambiguous situation. You want to know the facts. Is this an innocent situation or is it legitimate? And when you go up and talk to people, especially if they're engaged in odd behavior, ask them to stop. Tell them that they're scaring people. Ask them to stop. Those are the kind of things you can do to begin to evaluate, is this person going to be a bit more of a problem? If they stop and they go, oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to scare anybody, it begins to show you that they're compliant or they're not really wanting to upset folks. Versus if you ask them to stop their behavior and they don't stop, they don't seem to care, they don't seem to hear you, now that begins to escalate that situation. And especially if they begin to move towards you and approach you and they don't want to stop their behavior, then this begins to escalate the situation. And your assessment of that threat might begin to increase in this situation. So we want to keep our distance. We want to use barriers, stand behind a car in the parking lot, or if you've got some kind of retaining wall, or a little bit of distance is always a good thing as well as you begin to ask this person. So as you begin to approach, be cautious. Maybe we don't walk right up to the person, but we begin to say, as we get 15 or 20 feet away, we begin to say hi and greet them and say, begin to go through that process of, could I ask you not to do that because it's starting to worry people and, looks bad, that kind of thing. Whatever it might be that you'd say to them, and you have to decide that based on your communication, based on your church, the location, the people, that kind of thing. So, but keeping that distance during that initial evaluation, being cautious as you move in. I've talked to our security team and I've talked to them about, hey, if something comes up, I'm not a big fan of running to it. A little trot, a fast walk, to me is better because it gives your mind time to begin to engage the process, and it also gives you time to evaluate as you're moving into something, and be able to stop a distance and begin your discussion with that person to evaluate them. So instead of just running right up to them and getting close to them, we want to have that distance to evaluate and begin a communication so that we can assess the threat and decide what that issue is. So thanks for joining me for this edition. We're going to have a part 2 of this use of force discussion coming up here. So watch for that to be released, or look for it in our videos, in our podcasts, vlogs, whether you get this in audio or video. Watch for that because it'll be the next segment coming in. Part 2 for the use of force. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate this opportunity to interact with you, provide you with some valuable content and discussion that are my opinions. And I'm so thankful that you're joining us. And I'm thankful that you listened all the way to the end. I appreciate that. So don't forget, we have information all day, every day for you at the churchsecurityanswerman.com. And look at this next one. Look for this next video, and I hope you'll join us for it. And I hope you'll use it. Share it with your team members. Share it with your church leaders. Give them the link or share it with them, because we want you all to be on the same page and discuss it. Maybe you don't agree. Have the discussion to decide what your action is. Even if you don't agree with what I have to say here, use it as a starting point to have a discussion of what your leaders want from you. So again, thanks for joining me for this edition. I hope you have a safe and secure week.